Children become what you pour into them. The words of a Nigerian proverb that bring us into this episode of the Jamaican Dads Podcast. I'm Dennis Brooks.
I'm Garth Williams.
And I'm Floyd Green.
And we are Jamaican Dads. Welcome to the podcast. This program is about providing Jamaican men with a safe and healthy space and a functional forum to tackle many of the taboo topics which concern our masculinity.
Well, listeners, viewers, it doesn't matter whether or not you have loads of experience. It doesn't matter if you come to this podcast from differing worldviews. We are committed to this place that we call Jamaica, this place that we call home, and we are committed to our families.
Absolutely. A lot of the information out there about parenting is written by women and for women. And while nothing is wrong with that, we need more dad-centric views, which is why we're here. So we are here to be the change that we want to see.
Absolutely. Well, we have another great show lined up for you today. We've got, of course, as always, Dad, Try This. We have another cool life hack in that feature. Plus, of course, we have Fresh to Death. And we close out our ongoing feature on beard care. And, of course, in our main discussion this week, in the meat of the matter, we have the first 1,000 days of life. So we're talking developmental psychology today. Very important. What are our roles? But before we get there, let's fire off with the opening salvo.
In this week's opening salvo, we discuss the lessons we learned from an online article about a man who grew up with no father and how he started a YouTube channel to teach others called Dad, How Do I? So it's a very interesting bit, this one. He grew up with no father. His name is Rob Kenny, all right? He's from the UK. He's a father of two, and what he does is share how-to lessons on his YouTube channel, and it's gone viral because of its wholesome content, right? In April of this year, Rob Kenny, who is 55, started his YouTube channel, Dad, How Do I?, where he began sharing videos of himself explaining how to perform life skills such as unclogging the drain, ironing a shirt, checking your car's oil. And by the way, we'll put a link to the article in the video description, right? According to Kenny, whose own father left when he was 12, he created the channel to, quote, do my best to provide useful practical content to many basic tasks that everyone should know how to do. And he explains that in the About section of his channel. In an interview he did with an online source called Shattered, he said that his goal in life was not to be wealthy or successful, but to raise good adults. And once he had achieved that, he realized he had knowledge left to share. So
I like it.
to Mr. Cool. Kenny, that's Rob Kenny.
Very good. Here.
We salute you,
done,
sir. Well done. That's brilliant. But your thoughts, Floyd?
Sorry, I think that's a great initiative. I don't think we appreciate how much not having a father around to ask certain basic things impacts children, right? So the fact that he has decided to set up a channel where people can go to to get these life skills that normally a dad would show in the household, I think is a great move. And it resonates with me, particularly because, as you all know, my father lived away, right? So there's certain things that, especially as a boy child growing up, you don't want to ask your mother. You don't want, you don't want your mother to tell you about, right? And you can just suffer in silence because you don't have a father right there to go to and say, Daddy, how I would do this, right? And it just feels more natural if you have a father to say, Daddy, how this go, right? Or to see him do it and then follow him. So I think that's a great move.
I feel very much the same way because it is, for me, very much the same. I remember when I started growing facial hair and I thought about shaving. It was a very, very sad time for me as a teen because I was angry. It wasn't even sad. Angry time for me as a teenager because I thought I will not have my father to teach me how to shave. And it was very important to me. Also, I remember my older brothers trying to teach me how to drive. And the first lesson didn't go very well.
Yeah.
And I was fuming. I was angry for days. I mean, it was, I think I just took it as more than I needed to take it to be. But it's just that it meant that I didn't have him to teach me how to drive.
Right.
And I decided, I need to learn how to drive. Or, you know, and then
Professional passenger for life.
and then funny enough, how I ended up learning how to drive was, we eventually changed cars. So it was an automatic car back in the day. And it was a case of, you know, typical boy, you volunteered to wash the car. And my brothers weren't around at the time. I think they were, one was abroad and one was just out. And me take time, I'll reverse the car and screech and drive. And I felt so liberated. But I was determined I'm not going to ask them.
Yeah.
But like for me, I think that my father not being around, I had to consult the internet of the day, which was the encyclopedia. Wow. So like rather than ask anybody certain things, it was always
reading
the encyclopedia. And I think that kind of helped the nerd thing. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no. I mean, well, on that nerd matter, I used to be punished to go and read. So, reading was my punishment.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just observing the pages in the book. I had to know what's going on because my mother was going to quiz me about it. Yeah, there you go. But on this note, with Rob Kenny and Dad, How Do I, the channel on YouTube, it resonates a lot with me too. I didn't grow with my father in the house all day, every day. He did get a chance, however, to teach me a lot. We had a lot of interaction growing up, but I did not have that kind of, you know, him in the house. Okay, this is what a wrench look like. This is what it's used for. It's what a screwdriver does, etc., etc., etc. You know, those kind of DIY around the house kind of things. It is important. I mean, the truth is, when you think about these types of tasks, some of these tasks that are assigned to men in the house, these are things that any person can do. You know, any able-bodied for the most part, you know what I mean, can do. So a woman, a mother, can, you know, make an adjustment to...
Except that, when you get to a certain age as a young boy or as a man and you can't do it and you don't even realize that you can't do it, you know what you end up hearing by then? Big old man like you and you can't. I mean, there are things that I never learned to do, I guess, or I learned to do late, or I learned to do by research, that I would have heard somebody say, so, oh, you can't do so and so and so.
I am man.
I am man. You know, so it now, when it becomes a question of your manhood, and then you realize, why don't I know how to do this? And you're like, oh, that's why.
And the truth is, you know, as wrong as it may be, people do assign things.
Yeah, there's gender-based division of labor in the household.
Automatically expect that as a man, you're able to fix a car.
Right,
and that you know, thank God, cars are now computer driven. So the expectation kind of rearrange because nobody can own it. But them really expect.
But men of our age or boys of our age
and pull down engine and you understand, like.
But not even so sometimes so complicated as that. But like certain, I guess you would have considered it handiwork,
right?
Like you're supposed to know, or I mean,
fit up things.
Yeah,
right.
You know,
things.
Right. Those kind of handiwork, or you're supposed to be handy around the house.
Right.
You know, you're supposed to, of course, because there are things that are assigned to you. Of course, I'm supposed to sharpen all knives and cutlasses in the house. It's just, but thankfully, you learn that in metalwork, or I learned that in metalwork. You know,
I know you have the internet. So
exactly.
But also, and I really find it's definitely in this instance, especially important for boys.
Yes.
Very, very important that they learn some of these things from their father. Because that is who they're going to be searching for naturally to learn from. So like then if you
But Floyd, you said something before, and I don't want us to lose sight of it, which is you pointed out that whether it is he taught you or you had a chance to just observe him doing it. Because many of the things that you learn from Dad are things that he didn't literally say, come, let me teach you this.
It is,
but by virtue of watching him. And when I see Jackson watch me.
Absolutely. Intently.
And that is the thing. Some of the times, and if you watch children and you think about, but that's how we stay, like they will watch you. they will note it and then they will repeat it or weeks later sometimes.
Well, let me tell you something. That I think Garth had mentioned it in one episode, but like I see Nate do it, and it's so crazy. So like when he does something wrong, and his mother starts to chastise him, like let us say he's in the kitchen and he did something like leave the fridge door open. And I say, Nathaniel, why you do that? And he just take him a little time and go over to her and put him like a head on her shoulder and start rolling. And then she just say, you learn it from your father.
because daddy does it.
Because, you know, when you want to raise issue with me, just take me look at time and I go. But you don't recognize that he watches it.
Yes.
Right? He assesses the situation and say, all right, I true, daddy did something wrong, you know.
Right.
And see, this is how him appease her. And him start doing the same thing as night for the day. So it's really, a lot of it has to do with observation. 100%.
Absolutely. I mean, let me tell you, what I believe, like particularly in our time now, what we need to do is, I think both parents, especially if you have them in the house, right? But even if they're not, both parents have to take a special effort to teach their children all sorts of things, especially in the house. You know what I mean? All sorts of things. So fathers, yes, teach them about tools and what they're used for. You know what I mean? Pull down a door handle or just take a doorknob off a door, put it back on. You know what I mean? Make adjustments to the plumbing, that kind of a thing. Check for things around the house. Mommy should do it too. It can't just be that mommy only take on the things that she's inclined to, or the things, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to describe it any differently.
But the reality is that things are changing, you know? Because I think there used to be very strong, strict, defined rules.
Gender,
right?
And it was reflected in chores too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have boy chores and girl chores.
Yeah, absolutely.
In some houses, you dare not give a boy girl chores. A war between the parents. Give me something. Why you give a boy? He might not girl. You know, because you're
but absolutely. And then generation before us really believed in that, and they really had those strictly defined things. But I find now it's a lot different. You know, men and women do virtually a lot of the same things, and a lot of the women nowadays will do the handiwork and are quite capable of doing the handiwork. But again, I just
think the men are doing the cooking.
Absolutely. And they're quite capable too, right? Absolutely. Quite so. But there's some lessons I think like fathers should teach boys.
Absolutely. Yeah, man.
You know, like the toilet seat.
Toilet seat dynamics.
Yeah, keep it down. For peace in the house.
Like, lift it up and
then close it. It's simple. It's simple. The biggest point for me though, from what Kenny said, was his goal in life was to raise good adults. And I think every parent has to keep that at the forefront of their minds. Every father, especially, keep that at the front of your mind. Do every single thing you can to ensure that your child or children all become well-thinking, considerate adults, well-adjusted, people who can positively contribute to society. Stop raise the cruff them. The only reason we have cruff in a society are because the parents never did enough to prevent the cruff behavior.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So and I'm not saying that every cruff parents they try, never try, but
my parents are cuss about that. So my parents out there, so they try their utmost.
True, I mean there will be exceptions. I mean obviously there will be exceptions. I can take that. But by and large, if you make the very strong effort, and it's not only what you do in the house, you know, but it's also how you shape how them think, because that's the other side of the matter.
Environment, again, you know, sometimes the parents are doing their best, but they're growing them up in an environment that's not conducive. You understand? So some of the things that we've spoken about, hopefully people take them on, because the environment, your parenting style, all of those things really contributes to the adult that you're creating.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Well, that's all the time we have for the opening salvo for this week. We also want to hear from you, so feel free to send your questions, send your suggestions to Jamaican Dads Podcast. Remember, Dads with a Z. Jamaican Dads Podcast at gmail.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram at Jamaican Dads, and you can join us in the discussion on Twitter with the hashtag Jamaican Dads, and you can use the handle The Jamaican Dads as well. Well, that's all the time. We need to take a break here on the Jamaican Dads podcast. When we return, it'll be time for the meat of the matter. Welcome back to the Jamaican Dads podcast. In this segment, we are into the meat of the matter, and it is my pleasure in this segment to have the head of the Institute of Gender and Development Studies at the UWI, Dr. Karen Carpenter. Welcome to the program, Dr. Carpenter.
Thank you for having me. I'm particularly chuffed, as they say, to be here because I'm not a dad.
Exactly. But it is so important. The conversation that we're having today is one that I think that you are well placed to help us with. We are looking at the first 1,000 days of life and what are the important developmental markers that we should be looking out for, that we should be facilitating as parents in general and fathers in particular.
Yeah. And so we think about development primarily in terms of growth, physical growth, because it's the most obvious thing we can see, right? So from the growth in the womb, where the woman's tummy becomes distended, and you begin to see, oh, it's the first trimester, second trimester, coming up to the birth, third trimester, and you know the baby's getting bigger because the belly's getting bigger. But what we're not really quite aware of, some of us, is that the baby's also learning some things inside the womb. So one, the baby's taking in nutrition from the mom, but the baby's also learning about the environment that they're coming into. And if you could imagine walking around in a room with your eyes closed all the time, but your other senses working, then that's what it's like for the baby in the womb. They're hearing sounds, they're feeling sensory perceptions, they're moving about, and mom can tell you what the baby moved or didn't move. I'll give you a quick instance. For instance, in my first beginning of those 1,000 days with my own son, my youngest child, I was baking a lot. And every time I moved towards the oven, he would move. And so I knew the heat was affecting him, even in the womb. He could perceive the change in heat. Now, when he was born, I had a hard time keeping him away from the oven. And I used to constantly fear that he would go and touch the oven because he had become so used to that heat and responding to the heat that he'd run into the kitchen and go towards the oven when I was baking. So I had to break him of that. And that was something he learned. My daughter is older than him. I was riding onto last spring and was born. The first sound I saw her react to with intense delight was the sound of horses' hoofs. And if I wanted to calm her down, I'd drive her down to Up Park Camp, where the policemen would be on the horses at the time, back in the day. And she would be so delighted to see a horse, and she would make the sound of the hoof. That's one of the first sounds she made. So she said something like, because she couldn't say gallop, right? So she was reacting to something that had happened in the womb. So if we even doubt that in the womb, babies are learning some of their environmental cues, then we have some very good evidence that that's so. So it's important what's happening naturally. Go ahead.
So if that is true, then how do we, from the child is in the womb and us trying to provide support, because when mommy is pregnant, we feel useless, but we can provide support. How can we provide even an intellectually stimulating environment from an early age?
So a couple of things. One of them is going to be mother's reaction, because what's happening in her bloodstream in terms of pleasant endorphins, meaning I'm feeling good, or fear responses, which are adrenal, which means I'm afraid, that's transmitted to the baby. So because I wasn't afraid of the horses and I wasn't afraid of the oven, both children had their individual responses to the stimuli. If when dad comes into the room, I become fearful, that's going to be transmitted to the child. Because the environment the child is in has changed. If when dad comes into the room, I become full of endorphins and I relax and my adrenal responses drop, the baby's also going to drop in adrenal responses. So we're not even aware that we're telling the baby how to respond to dad when we're in the womb. So women who are in stressful conditions are transmitting that through the lining of the womb to the child and in the bloodstream and in the enzymes and hormones that we're producing while the baby is in the womb. So when a relationship is fraught with difficulties, that baby is going to have a different response to that basal tone of dad's voice when he enters a room than he's going to have when dad is not around. So we want to start from there, creating that loving environment for the child. So that dad that rubs the tummy and says, hey baby, how you doing, baby? Hello, my son, my daughter, whatever. They're creating that positive response in the mother, which is transmitted to the child. I have another relative who, from her child was in the womb, she would use headphones that were music oriented, and she'd put the headphones on her stomach and she'd play classical music and she'd play Shakespeare and no, all her children are very bright, so it's quite difficult to tell if that was the cause, but certainly she believed at the time that that would help. So mother's response is very important. Babies, when they're born, coming into the second stage of that first 1,000 days, are attuned instinctually for their survival to things that mother can provide. So they're attuned to the smell of breast milk, they're attuned to the smell of the mother, they're attuned to the high-pitched tones that women use that we call baby ease, but are not so attuned to the basal tones that men use, those deep voices, and they're not so attuned to the smell of the father, etc. So again, we have an opportunity. If that baby has been getting that loving voice in the womb from the dad, we can now imprint. We call that imprinting. We can imprint that voice in loving tones again when the baby comes out. That reinforces how the mother reacted in the womb. Yes? So we can give the baby a reinforcement for that positive feel-good hormone once the baby is in the world.
Yeah, I want to join. Yeah, it's really more a comment than a question. It's just to kind of confirm what you're saying, because I've got two children. My daughter is 11, my son is 7. And in both cases, I was always on mommy's belly, talking, saying things. I mean, just kind of goofing around generally. But what I noticed, though, is that once they were born and they heard me, they could easily make that differentiate daddy from mommy, and started to associate me, well, with not feeding. So,
yeah. But you see how you imprinted them.
Yeah.
Because they heard it in the womb, but they have to hear it again outside the womb to make the connection.
Right.
Because now they want to take that imprinting and cement it. And that creates a neural pathway for your voice. And whatever your voice means, whether it means fear or joy or comfort, you're now saying, here I am, I'm the comfort that you heard in the womb, and I present in this way. So it's really great that you're able to use that, what we call brain plasticity, because babies are extremely plastic. But you've put in a voice recording in that baby's brain that connects with your presence, and you've got it hardwired now. Now that baby can look up when they hear that sound, because they're used to looking up for very high tones. They don't pick up on the low tones easily at birth. They pick up on the high-pitched ones. And that's why mother ease. Hello, baby. How are you doing? That's called mother ease. But you're adding a different wiring now that says, oh, baby, all right. Baby, good. How the baby feeling? And that baby now has 2 almost languages that they can tune into, 2 different radio stations they can tune into for the same kind of comfort and love and joy. And that's super important, because in more neural pathways that we get connecting during that plastic period is the more the brain will function dynamically later in life. So that's a super important thing.
Doc, from from my own experience, from my own academic experience, and Garth, Dr. Carpenter taught me developmental psychology many moons ago.
He was one of my best students.
And what for me, I think when I think of the development of the human being, I think very Ericksonian. And so I'm trying to wrap my mind around what is the child contending with in those first 1,000 days? What are they contending with?
Brilliant question. So the first thing that a child is going to contend with when they come out of the womb into the world in that second phase of the first 1,000 days, up to 6 months, they're going to want to trust the environment they're in. Now, when they were in the womb and I heard that deep basal tone, "Hello, baby. What you doing, baby? Why are you troubling mommy?" And that tone created calm in the mother. That was transmitted to the child. When they come out into the world, if that calm is maintained, it becomes hardwired. And they begin to associate that male voice with calm. They begin to associate that male voice with trust. And if that male voice is associated with caring for the child, feeding them the bottle, changing their diapers, bathing them, because we always talk to babies, we're constantly talking to them. When we're bathing them, changing them, whatever, then they begin to hardwire that trust from the womb to the trust in the environment. And trust is the first stage that children have to develop. Children who don't develop trust in that early stage of life are not trustworthy themselves. They become dishonest because they believe the world is a hostile place. They believe the world is a place that they have to fight against. But when mom and dad both prepare them for an environment where you can get fed, you can get changed, you can go to bed, nobody beats you, nobody harms you, and they respond to your cries, then that child becomes trusting and trustworthy. Without that trust, they will not venture out into the world. They will not be the person they could be at 32 if up to 2 they don't have that trusting environment. So we want them to trust both the male and the female, not just the female and fear the male. Yes, we don't want to get that dichotomous response going. They should associate both parents with care and trust and safety. Now, here's a great way that trust is communicated by fathers in particular. Mothers and fathers tend to have different types of play activities with children. Mothers tend, and it's just a generalization, it's not every mother, tend to be more gentle and focused on fine motor skills. Getting that block inside that hole with a little toy, Mr. Einstein or baby Einstein or any of these things. Fathers tend to be more focused on large muscle play, so stretching the limbs, lifting the baby, getting them to stand up on their feet as soon as they can stand up, and they go, open, the baby falls on again, and they do it again. If that baby can trust that voice, that basal voice, and they allow the father to pull them up and put them down, they develop trust before they can even toddle. So you see how the trust is working. It's really important. Most important thing for the young baby is trust and reliable care. So if it's connected with that voice and that feel and that larger frame of the man, they're going to trust people who are larger, who have that basal tone, who bring a different kind of existence to the child. And that large motor play is very important for the child when they start walking, toddling, jumping, skipping, playing sports. And the fine motor skills are very important for writing, holding a fork, holding a knife, brushing your hair, buttoning clothing, tying a shoelace. They need both.
Right.
The dads play a really important role in play by exposing them to more robust play, because the average man has 72% more body mass than the average woman of the same physiology. Yes. He'll be 72% more mass than her. So he's going to be more rugged in his play than her. And babies need both. They need that diversity. The more diversity we give them, the more their little brains are hardwiring to be much more flexible. And then the third thing I want to mention, which comes in the third stage, as we're moving out of the toddling and falling down and getting up, and mommy will go, oh my God, the baby. And daddy will go, no man, big boy, get up, come again. Yay! And the baby toddles towards him. So we need both types of encouragement. The third thing is language. Now, Dennis, you know I'm super, super keen when it comes to language. And the more languages a child can learn early, the more plastic their brain is early, the better they will do in school later on.
Yeah.
We have a golden opportunity in this country. Mm-hmm.
All right, Doc.
Go ahead.
So we've got to take a quick break. So just hold on to that point about language development, because we can build on that right after this. You're tuned into the Jamaican Dads podcast. Thank you so much. We've got with us Dr. Karen Carpenter. She's the head of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at the UWI Mona Campus. We'll be right back with more meat of the matter as we discuss the first 1,000 days with her.
Thanks for staying with us here on the Jamaican Dads podcast. I'm Dennis along with Garth, and we're having a conversation with the head of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at the Mona campus of the University of the West Indies, Dr. Karen Carpenter. Thanks for staying with us, Dr. Carpenter. Before we went to the break, you were making a very important point about language development. I'd really like for you to finish your point.
Okay, so I was saying that the more languages we learn in this plastic period of brain development, the more academically able children are. Research has shown that people who are multi and bilingual use more portions of their brain, use their brain more dynamically, and use that active zone of the brain to solve problems more deftly, with greater acuity, with greater diversity. In other words, I have a flexible brain. And I was saying further that we have a golden opportunity in Jamaica where we speak two languages. If we can maintain the difference between Jamaican and English, we would be teaching that child how to be bilingual in two languages from the get-go. If we mix them up.
How do we facilitate? How do we better? Because we've been socialized to see one as a bad version of the other and not two as distinct. How do we as fathers facilitate some patois, some Jamaican, and some English?
Okay. So the research that we've done in the Jamaican language unit points to the fact that when we mix up the languages, it's not as useful to the child as when we separate them. And that is what we call developing a bilingual consciousness. The child will learn Spanish and English. You wouldn't begin the sentence in Spanish and finish in English. You would more likely, if you wanted them to be bilingual, use English or use Spanish, or use both. So you could say the sentence in Spanish and then in English. And by both parents either deciding that one will speak in English and one will... We just had a glitch.
Sorry. By both parents?
Right. So with both parents speaking only in English or only in Jamaican, that helps the child to recognize the difference in the two languages. That helps the child to understand that there are two different sets of meanings to be gained by even words that sound as if they mean the same thing, like hand, middle. That doesn't exist in English. In English, it's your palm. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
In Jamaica, ask somebody and we want to say please or would you mind, we say I beg you pick up that thing there. That means would you mind picking that up? But until we can do that translation for the child's brain cannot make the distinction. And so when they enter school, they don't know what's English and what's Jamaican. And I think we give them a head start if we can separate for them the two languages. And even say to them when they begin their babalea, which is when they start speaking and they say da 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 and those things. As they learn language, we can say, can you say that in Jamaican? Can you say that in English? Yes? The child
So when the child says, "Give me my book," and you say, you don't say it that way. Say, can you say that in English?
yes, instead
Give
of
me the book.
right.
Give me my book.
Instead of
Like that.
Yeah, instead of correcting them for speaking badly, they're not speaking badly. They're speaking Jamaican. So ask them, can you say that in English? And when they say it in English, you can say, do you know how you say that in Jamaican? You are telling them by doing that there is a distinction. And I'll show you how this relates to male-female interaction. Men tend to speak more Jamaican than women. And when men speak English, they're considered feminine.
Yes.
Yeah,
Why you talk so nice? All right? So men tend to speak to their children more in patois, as we locally call it, than in English. There is benefit in using both when you're using only one. There's no benefit when you mix it up and give them part English, part patois. If you're going to speak to the child in patois, speak to the child in patois, finish your sentence, and then you can repeat it in English or ask them, do you know how to say it in English? Mama, Mama cut my foot bottom. Fine. Do you know how to say that in English? Yeah? And foot bottom is sole, the sole of my foot. That child has a great advantage. And that child is developing a very, very flexible brain. And by the time they're 2 years old, in that last part of that 1,000 days, they've already acquired 500 words that they know. That's their expressive language. They can say 500 words. And their receptive language is close to 2,000. So they can understand a lot more than they can say. Imagine if we doubled that to 1,000 words of expression in Jamaican and English and 2,000, 4,000 words in reception in Jamaican and English. That child will have a start. So when they enter school, they know the difference. And when they're exposed to a third and fourth language, they can quickly.
Got it. Now, Doc.
So that's the challenge to dads. If you're going to talk the part,
All right. The first 1,000 days is basically 2 3/4 of a year. So 2 years, 9 months, ballpark, right?
Yeah.
Super important to their overall development and how they will progress into adulthood or into other phases of life. However, we aren't, well, this is a learning experience for me. Now my kids are 7 and 11, so that's gone. Then it's close by there.
Right in the middle.
Then this is right there now. Jackson's what, 18 months?
Yeah.
Roughly? Okay, 16 months, right? So yeah, pretty much in the middle, right? Now, for those persons who may have missed out on really getting the best out of their child or children in those first 1,000 days, is there some kind of rescue path? What do you do moving forward?
Okay, so the approaches are different, and I'm glad we spoke about language because it offers us a good metaphor for learning. If you learned a language as a child between the ages of 0 to 9 years, 0 to 7 preferably, you will have learned it the way a native speaker speaks it. So if you learned English in the first 7 years of your life, you will speak it like someone who always spoke English. If you learned it after 7, 8, 9, you will have the errors of a second language speaker. So the question of whether we can go back depends on what age we're at and what we're trying to learn. And we have to remember that if we're going back to learn something that could have been done when a child's brain was plastic, we have to treat it differently. They're now a second language learner of that thing. They're not going to do it with the proficiency of the first language learner, the bilingual learner. they're going to learn these things in a more mechanical fashion. And so the way we teach them has to be different. That is behavioral techniques now to get them to do what we'd like them to do better. It's never too late. It just means that the wiring is different. It's the difference between a surface mounted plug and a plug that's hidden in the wall or underground. You can see the surface mounted plug.
Yeah.
But when the plug is properly done, when the building is being put up, we don't see the wires. Yeah? I don't know if that helps from a kind of male mechanical point of view.
Yeah, that's very good, actually. Really appreciate that. Now, in your practice, and you know, in terms of observation, what you've read, etc., have you ever come across a child, say, at age 10, or maybe even a child at age 15, displaying particular characteristics, and you could kind of almost trace it back to those first 1,000 days? I mean, are there red flags that pop up later in life that you go, hey, this is what, you know, could have caused this? So I want to advise parents or fathers in particular too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It shows up. It shows up. As a developmentalist, I'm always looking developmentally first and everything else an add-on. And within, I used to teach, and I used to teach young children, which was one of my greatest pleasures. For 17 years, I was a Montessori guide. So I worked with children from the ages of 1 to 12. And because Montessori classrooms are mixed, they're like a family. So you have kids of different ages in the classroom. And you could tell when a child had a misstep. And through the way we teach in Montessori, we would have that child go back to the initial stage. They would not learn as perfectly as a child who did it at the right stage, what we call the stage of development, that they have an open window for that learning. But they would be able to learn it semi-perfectly. And yes, we do seek in therapy in adults. In working with adults, I can tell where your stages got missed because of the issues you present with. Because once you get to 2 years, 9 months, that closing off of those 1,000 days, we're talking about autonomy versus shame and doubt. The child learns to do it by themselves, good about themselves, or they get up to do the thing and they look behind them and they look behind them and they look behind them to see if mama or papa is going to shame them. Yes? So the child who has a supportive trust environment moves from trust into stepping off and doing it themselves. And when they do it themselves and mama and papa allow them and then go, yay, great, they say, I can do it. And no, they don't need you to do it. But the child who doesn't get that kind of opportunity to do things on their own and get rewarded for it begins to doubt themselves. They get cowed, they get punished, they get beaten. The child develops this kind of shame about their activities.
It's something that I'm very cognizant about in raising Jackson, because very early when I would try to train him to do things and give him maybe not unconditional positive regard, but positive affirmation. And so like when I say now, when I say to him, good job, he does a thumbs up, like he's saying thumbs up, good job. He gives me that back. and when I watch him doing things on his tablet or playing with toys or stuff, he'll, especially if I'm in the room, he does something and he looks back at me like he's waiting for the praise. Like, you're not clapping. Like,
I did the
you're
same.
not clapping me. And so like I'm always clapping him, and so like he'll do a thing and clap himself.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying.
Well,
you mentioned language development, and I remember. Go ahead.
I was going to say, as he gets older, though, you want to replace that praise with what do you think? So you praise the first encouragement. And as you both develop that language that you're talking about and that interpersonal relationship, when he says, Daddy, is this good? Say to him, what do you think? Because that gives him autonomy. he begins to value his own opinion. And he doesn't become a praise junkie.
Right.
So he'll say to you, you might think this drawing is terrible, but he'll say to you, I think that's a good drawing.
Yes.
Say, okay. All right.
Absolutely. Look, Doc, we have so much more that we want to talk to you about, because we also want to talk about how we as dads can facilitate positive self-development even beyond the first 1,000 days. How can we help to raise more confident, assured children? I think we've laid the foundation, literally and metaphorically. I think we need to bring you back another time. But thank you so much for joining us.
Well done, Doc.
Well, it's been my pleasure.
Good job. Good job, Doc.
Thank you. Yeah. Good job. Well, what do you think? Great talking to you guys. Hope to
Thank
see
you very much.
And big up yourselves. Fantastic program. I'm so happy you're doing this. Yeah.
Cheers. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All the best. Bye-bye.
And that's all the time we have for the meat of the matter. Stick around when we return. Fresh to death.
Thanks for staying with us here on the Jamaican Dads Podcast. I'm Dennis Brooks, along with Floyd Green and Garth Williams. We're almost at the end of the podcast today. Thanks for joining us. It's now time for Fresh to Death, and you can join the discussion on Twitter with the hashtag Jamaican Dads, hashtag Fresh to Death. As Garth mentioned before the break, today we're looking at beard care once again. And of course, it is very important that, you know, if you want a good, healthy looking beard, not the frege, scraggly looking thing.
Did you just say frege?
Yeah, that's what my mother used to say.
That beard combo, I know you might
Yeah, we've been going for a few episodes without you regarding the beard, but we had to save one for you.
Thank you.
So we can carry you in person.
All right.
Yeah. Well, no, you need to particularly watch the podcasts when you weren't here for the beard conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wasn't pretty.
Yeah.
So you're here now, so we're
we can roast you right now.
Anyway, go through.
So this one's all about 3 beard rules you shouldn't break. 3 beard rules you shouldn't break. So whenever you get there, Floyd, write these down.
But that's what I asked you. What qualifies beard? My beard nice. The girl don't like it.
You're not bared. Beard.
Beard.
Not bared.
Anyway, continue.
All right, so the 3 rules are simple. Choose a style that flatters your face, maintain it, and keep it in balance. And you've been doing a fairly good job, Floyd. With what you've got, you've made it work. You made it work. Just as you would with any hairstyle, make sure that whatever style of scruff you decide to grow flatters the face, the shape of your face. A good beard will give your face more definition and a stronger jawline. Pay attention to guys who you think look cool with beards. Their beards are probably complementary to their face shapes. I don't know if you've ever seen anybody who we can use Dennis as one example. When he had a full beard versus now when he
police look.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Right? But the truth is, Dennis's beard did actually fit his face and the way he cut it. So rather than having to cut his beard in weird ways, he ensured that the jawline was maintained properly, right? The other rule, of course, is to maintain it, right? And that's another part of it, maintaining it properly, brushing it,
So don't you make the points and beard enough for everybody?
No,
we didn't.
No, that didn't
Back
come
to
up.
the first
actually.
point, you know, the truth is,
Some
terms of your face shape might not work.
Right.
All right.
beard.
Some people,
some people
for
that try to
instance,
be
some
a
people
teenage.
cannot grow anything in this top section, but it grows heavier down here.
Right.
Maybe you should line it lower. You
Right.
understand? And so you're connecting it from down here.
Right.
You see somebody with that now, And as you were saying just a while ago, you see that and say, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. But that doesn't necessarily compliment your
Absolutely.
face.
They end up looking like a joke.
Yeah, no. exactly.
Yeah.
So you just work with what
Yeah.
you have, or in Floyd's case, in what you don't have.
Right.
And so, you know, it
Well,
tends
that's
to...
episode, anyway, sorry, guys.
Yeah.
The second point about
That's right.
brushing.
Maintaining it. Yeah. So facial hair, like any other hair, grows half an inch in a month, or so they say, right? For some people, it might be faster. Others, it might be slower. Want a robust beard? Clip once a week. Just clip it up. Want stylish stubble? Expect to trim it every other day. Because there are some people, for example, like me. Like this is like about 10 days old, right? And I'll have to clip this very soon, unless I'm planning to kind of grow it out nice and full, which I'm not always up to growing it out really full, because it ages my face somewhat. So, but the most important thing is, if you're going to, if you decide that what you want is just low maintenance, then go with that. But just don't say you have to go put it in the work.
That's the third thing.
Keep it in balance. Having facial hair means you'll have to pay more attention to your haircut. Keeping it polished will balance out the raskiness of your facial scruff. And ask your stylist or your barber, of course, for product recommendations to use at home for your hair and your beard. So you might have to get a balm or a special oil, but make sure, say, you always, you know.
Well, the one thing I would say about the beard, and yeah, clearly I'm not, you know, but it really does make a difference in terms of how you look. So if I grow my little out a little, right, it completely makes me look completely older. And if I take it off, I'm back to high school, 100%.
All right, good stuff. Back to the city on the hill. All right, that's it for Fresh to Death. We hope that you will keep and care your beards, or just grow whatever facial hair in whatever style that complements you. Thank you so much. All right, as we head towards the finish line of the program right now, we've got one more. It's called Dad Try This, and we're going to take a break and come back in the blink of an eye.
All right, it's now time for Dad Try This, a cool life hack that we're sharing with you. And today in Dad Try This, we are recommending creating an email address for your children, with the idea to send them things and give them the password at an appropriate age. It's a cool idea, Garth.
You can send them things, various types of things, inspirational things, insightful things, things you think are important.
It's about getting them into the digital age.
Yeah, and it's about getting them into the digital age as well.
Digital archiving.
Archiving, more importantly.
Digital
Archiving.
archiving.
That's really what it is. So, for example, right now, my daughter is 11. I have resisted the idea so much of getting her a smartphone and putting particular apps like just these messaging apps on it, right? But I couldn't get around it because of the online schooling, right? So she now has WhatsApp. And what I do on WhatsApp is that from time to time I will just message her some cool stuff that I'll find online. I know she's very much interested, for example, like in cosmetology. And she has now developed an interest in media. So I send her cool things that she can learn from, and links to like YouTube videos of kids her age and in and around her age, and some of the more productive ideas that they're engaging in, or activities they're engaging in. So it's almost like, in other cases, or in this case, we're recommending the email address, right? Your kids might be very young now, but lots of the lessons you want to share with them, you can share, but they may not necessarily hang on to it right away. But if you send them these emails from now, when they get to a particular age and you say, hey, check this out, they will have a moment when they will go through and say, oh, wow, Dad, I did not understand what you were saying then, but this is helpful now.
Well, let me tell you what had to happen, and, you know, I guess positive, negative, but one of the pluses of COVID is that with the online schooling, the same thing. So we had to do an email address for Nate, because the program that the school was using to issue work called for an email address, right? So I actually learned a lot of good, cool things. So Google actually does have a child account. Right. So when you put in the email address, depending on the age of your child, it automatically filters, right? And it has a certain age before it can access certain sites, right? That you can change, but it has a standard age. I think the standard age is 12, right? But you can change that. So, for example, they can only access a version of YouTube.
Right.
Right, they can't access the full YouTube. It's very limited to like just children programming, right?
Age appropriate.
Yeah, age appropriate. And they're just so remember the other thing that I found really cool with Google is that you can basically set up a family account.
Right, that's what we have.
Right, so you can fully monitor everything your child does online through the account. Yeah, and put in all the things that are allowed, the things that are not allowed, etc. So you may think it's early, but it's never 97, right? But it's never really too early to engage them in that digital space because they're already more likely engaged. So I think it's really cool in terms of sending them the information they can get, and also for them to use and start developing their own profile online.
So, and what I recommended in terms of what we do with WhatsApp, for example, I recommend to all parents, right? If your child has a device where they have messaging apps, ensure that you are one of their friends. You understand me? And ensure that you have access to the device as well. Because even at home, both our kids have tablets, right? But there is screen time. So there's a set number of hours. So when it reaches that time, it just cut off. It can't turn on again until the next day.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? But we know the password as well. And I said to them, any day when you change the password and me don't know how to get into the tablet, you don't have a device anymore. You know what I mean? So there is a way to approach it. There's a very responsible way to approach it.
Absolutely.
But the most important thing is that once you engage your children, you follow up with them and don't just make it be a thing where, them just have the device or they have the email address and them gone about their business. Use it productively as part of your parenting process.
Definitely. I think that's a cool one. I'll try it one day.
Yeah.
I'll try it one day. Definitely.
Sooner than you think.
Yes, so true. Because I need to tell a story about that. But that's all the time we have for the program for today. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Jamaican Dads podcast. We're at the end, so as always, we're going to encourage you to let us hear from you by sending us an email, jamaicandadspodcast@gmail.com. Send us a DM if you prefer. Facebook, Instagram @Jamaican Dads. You can send us a message on Twitter @The Jamaican Dads as well, and always tweet us using the hashtag Jamaican Dads so we can always track the conversation that's taking place in various spaces. So until next time, I'm Dennis.
I'm Garth.
Always Floyd.
We are
Jamaican Dads.
Take care till next time.